At dusk in San Francisco, heavy fog slowly crept through the canyons of skyscrapers. It enveloped the dignified exterior of a long-standing luxury department store, and dimly blurred the reflection of Marcus Foster in the large glass windows. At 24, he was dressed in a deep indigo janitor's uniform, quietly gripping a mop with a hefty brass handle. Through the window, luxury cars continuously passed by, their glossy bodies shimmering under the streetlights. "Working again tonight, Marcus?" Tom, his colleague, holding a worn-out cleaning tool, called out to him with a voice mixing sympathy and understanding. "Yeah." Marcus responded briefly, lowering his gaze. In his hand was the paycheck he had received that morning, barely covering the rent for his modest shelter. 15 years ago, a boy alone was found in an alley on the outskirts of San Francisco, remembering only that his name was Marcus. He was taken in by a local orphanage and later adopted by the foster family. However, after his foster father's business failed, Marcus was forced to live without any relatives again. Unable to afford tuition, he drifted between unstable jobs and occasionally lived on the streets. Who am I really? Marcus sometimes wondered about his identity and where he was heading. His rootless circumstances brought on bouts of anxiety, and he gripped his mop harder. At that moment, the department store's heavy automatic doors smoothly opened, and a young woman briskly appeared outside, Catherine Kingston, the daughter of the department store's owner. Catherine, at 23, carried herself with a poise that belied her age, warmly smiling at the employees as she busied herself with preparations for a charity event. Her deep emerald green dress made her stand out like a lone flower in a winter garden. But a strong will was apparent behind her graceful demeanor. A mysterious warmth always seemed to radiate around her, softening the weary faces of the employees whenever she passed by. Marcus had seen this countless times. He remembered a cold winter night 6 months ago, under the eaves of this old department store. He had been shivering through the night. Accustomed to street life, the cold had bit deeply that day. Then Catherine appeared. She handed him a paper cup of warm coffee and a sandwich left over from the department store's cafeteria, saying with a gentle smile, "We always provide meals here." Marcus still vividly remembered the warmth in her eyes at that moment. A week later, Catherine found him again and introduced him to a janitorial job and a shelter. It might have been a small act of kindness for her, but for Marcus, that night's warmth and the smile when she offered him a job were moments that deeply marked his life. "She is different," Marcus quietly murmured to himself. His eyes followed Catherine's elegant demeanor. "She has something that sets her apart from the superficial philanthropists in this city." Suddenly, their eyes met, Catherine's clear blue eyes locked with his. She stopped, smiled softly at him, and Marcus hastily looked away, feeling sweat on his palms as he tried to calm his pounding heart. "Good evening, Mr. Foster." Catherine's voice carried a warm dignity. Marcus was surprised that she remembered his name. "Ah, yes, good evening." His words caught in his throat, but he managed a polite reply. "Would you be able to help with the preparations for the homeless support event tomorrow?" "An event?" "Yes. We'll provide warm meals and necessary support to those in shelters and living on the streets. There will also be booths for job consultations and medical advice, and we will distribute clothing and daily necessities," Catherine said with a gaze full of sincerity and determination. "Of course, we'll pay you overtime." Marcus hesitated for a moment. He was daunted by the idea of additional hours of work after his night shift cleaning. But he couldn't find a reason to refuse in front of Catherine's earnest gaze. The compassion in her eyes seemed to melt the barriers in his heart bit by bit. "I understand. I'll help." His reply was tinged with an enthusiasm he hadn't noticed before. Late that night, in the executive office on the department store's top floor, Victor Lawrence stood by the window. The cityscape below, veiled in fog, glimmered faintly. In his hand was a crystal glass filled with amber-colored scotch, the liquid ominously reflecting the city lights. The media had recently begun to cover Catherine's charity work extensively, casting a dark shadow over Victor's heart. He sighed deeply in his high-end leather chair. "This is turning out badly." His muttering disappeared into the silence. He downed the glass in one gulp, savoring the bitterness at the back of his throat. 13 years ago, Richard Kingston, the department store's founder and a dedicated philanthropist, died suddenly in an accident. The shock of his death had a significant impact on San Francisco's financial world. At that time, 10-year-old Catherine and her mother Martha were enveloped in deep grief. During those difficult times, Victor Lawrence, Richard's close friend, supported them devotedly. He actively participated in managing the department store, steering the company as if he were continuing Richard's legacy. 3 years later, Martha and Victor remarried. Outsiders perceived the marriage as a noble decision by a longtime friend to protect the bereaved family. However, the reality was part of a meticulously planned scheme of control. Victor manipulated board members through illegal stock manipulation and cunning threats, limiting the voting rights of the shares inherited by Martha and Catherine and sealing their involvement in management. 5 years after Martha's death from illness, Victor cunningly encouraged Catherine's interest in charity, further obstructing her involvement in management. While outwardly playing the role of a compassionate stepfather, he transformed the department store into a mere tool for profit-making. The soft ding of the executive elevator broke the silence. A secretary entered with the latest report, her footsteps absorbed by the thick carpet, leaving only a faint sound in the space. "Here is the budget forecast for tomorrow's homeless support event." The secretary bowed politely and placed a leather file on Victor's desk. Victor casually opened the file and scanned through it, his eyes gradually widening with astonishment. Catherine had begun to show outstanding organizational skills and precise budget management through her charitable activities. Each number told the story of her entrepreneurial talent. It was only a matter of time before she took a genuine interest in management. Damn. His fingers tightened around the edge of the document, creasing the expensive paper. Even under the warm amber lighting, Victor's expression cast a sinister shadow. The next morning, the department store's employee cafeteria was bustling with activity from early on. Morning sunlight streamed onto the marble floors, casting the busy people's shadows on the walls. Catherine efficiently directed the volunteers, who moved about eagerly. The scene was like the gears of a finely tuned clock, maintaining perfect harmony. Marcus quietly continued his tasks, captivated by Catherine's leadership. She led people with innate approachability and pushed forward with sharp decision-making skills. Her presence was a true embodiment of born leadership. "Mr. Foster, could you please help with the serving over here?" Catherine's voice gently interrupted Marcus's thoughts. It carried not a command, but a calm request. "Yes, I understand." He moved swiftly, arranging warm meals neatly on the polished stainless steel tables. Only those who had experienced life in a shelter knew the luxury of a warm meal. This knowledge made Marcus's movements all the more careful. The event exceeded expectations. More than 100 homeless people received warm meals along with employment support and lifestyle consultation services. Catherine spoke sincerely with each individual, listening intently to their words. Her eyes held a serious intent on remembering every word spoken to her. During the cleanup, Marcus hesitated several times, but finally decided to speak to Catherine. Miss Kingston, today's event was wonderful. I think many people found new hope. Catherine smiled gracefully, the soft afternoon light making her expression even warmer. Thank you. But this is just the beginning. I want to establish this effort more systematically and as a continuous initiative. Just then, the elevator door quietly opened, and Victor's figure emerged. His heavy footsteps struck the marble floor, and a chill seemed to flow into the room. Catherine, we need to talk. His voice, honed by years of authority, was tinged with a frost-like coldness that dominated the space. Catherine's expression clouded for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. However, Marcus did not miss her brief disturbance. Marcus, thank you very much for today. She expressed her gratitude politely and followed her stepfather. A fleeting shadow seemed to hang over her back. Marcus watched their retreating figures, feeling an indescribable anxiety spreading in his chest, as if a heavy fog was enveloping his heart. Victor's office reigned on the department store's top floor. When the heavy wooden door opened, the evening light stained the room with antiques and red. Have a seat, Victor commanded without turning around, his tone devoid of any warmth. What is this about? Catherine asked calmly as she sat in the luxurious leather chair, her voice carrying a maturity beyond her years. It's about your future. Isn't it about time you thought about getting married? Victor turned slowly and looked down at Catherine. What are you talking about all of a sudden? I'm aware that there have been objections to your funding at the board meetings. The budget for charitable activities has been increasing annually. There are also concerns from our business partners about the impact on our core business. Catherine frowned elegantly. Many people's lives depend on these activities. That's exactly why I have a proposal. Victor approached the desk solemnly, his voice heavy. The crystal paperweight trembled slightly with his movement. You will marry Marcus Foster, the janitor. You can't be serious. Even as a joke, that's too much. It's no joke. Think about it. Victor perched on the edge of his expensive desk with a malicious grin. A philanthropist marries a former homeless man, giving him a new life. The media would love it. Donations would increase. The scope of your activities would expand. Of course, I'll continue to manage the department store as before. You can immerse yourself in what you want to do, as much or even more than now. His posture oozed confidence in his complete control of the situation. The antique clock ticked heavily. And above all, he won't have any say in the company's management. Catherine furrowed her brows as she tried to understand Victor's mumbled words. But his real intentions were beyond her grasp. A portrait of her real father on the wall seemed to silently observe this perplexing situation. What do you mean? Catherine's voice was a mix of confusion and anxiety. Her fingertips gripped the back of the antique chair, her gesture revealing bewilderment at the unreasonable situation. Victor slowly poured whiskey from a decanter, admiring the amber liquid as it filtered the light. The ice tinkled quietly against the crystal glass in the oppressive silence. Well, anyway, I don't think you have a choice right now. Victor was smiling, but his voice was chillingly cold. The arrogance of a longtime power holder seeped through his every word. If you refuse, all company support for your cherished charity activities will be cut off from now on. That's outrageous. Catherine's face was drained of color. Her reflection in the window looked as fragile as a white candle. That night, Marcus was met with an unexpected visitor. In the common area of the shelter, Victor was waiting under the sterile light of the fluorescent lamps. His expensive suit stood out starkly, and the peeling paint on the walls highlighted the disparity between their worlds. I have a proposal for you. Victor's words cut through the grimy air of the shelter. He pulled an envelope from his high-quality leather wallet and handed it to Marcus. The fluorescent light illuminated the envelope, revealing the outline of a check inside. Marcus looked at the envelope with a confused expression. The scars from his life on the streets were evident on his hands, in stark contrast to Victor's perfectly manicured fingertips. The faint noise from the shelter's old heating system added tension to their mismatched encounter. What is this? If you agree to marry Catherine, all of this will be yours. Victor's voice was calm yet heavy, sinking into the space like a lead weight. Outside the window, the San Francisco nightscape twinkled with countless lights. She has agreed to it. Catherine has. She wants to marry someone genuine like you. Of course. It would also improve the image of our department store's charitable activities. Victor hinted meaningfully, and a deep shade of torment appeared on Marcus's face. His secret feelings for Catherine and the staggering amount of money offered weighed heavily on him. With this money, he could save many of his peers who were still living on the streets. The possibility was a sweet temptation, shaking his resolve. I'll think about it. Marcus's words dissolved into the air, leaving a heavy echo. The old ceiling of the shelter seemed to bear the weight of many lives. The streetlight streaming through the window cast deep shadows on his tired face. Victor nodded satisfactorily and left, his expensive leather shoes echoing on the floor as he departed. As his footsteps faded, the dim corridor of the shelter seemed to carry a faint scent of disinfectant and the dreams and despair of its inhabitants. Marcus sank deeply into an old sofa, his heart never clearing. As someone who knew Catherine's kindness and sincerity, he understood that revealing this deal would deeply hurt her. The second hand of an old clock on the wall slowly ticked away his anguish. A few days later, fate orchestrated an unexpected encounter. In the department store's break room, hidden behind a large potted plant, Marcus found himself alone with Catherine. Catherine, Marcus began, sighing quietly. I've heard from Victor about our marriage. Confusion flickered across Catherine's face. Her fingers unconsciously pinched the white cloth of the table. The faint vibration from the outdated air conditioning seemed to amplify the oppressive silence. I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't mean to involve you in this situation. Outside, under the shining sunlight, leaves on the street trees rustled in the wind. This peaceful scene starkly contrasted the dark reality they were facing. The sound of department store employees walking in the corridor reached them from afar. No. Marcus gazed at Catherine earnestly. His eyes carried the deep contemplation of years of hardship. I just want to know your true feelings. Catherine let out a deep sigh and walked towards the window. The sunlight gently illuminated her profile. Marcus, I have something to tell you. Victor has pressured me to marry. If I refuse, he will cut off all funding for the charity work. Marcus's expression hardened. After a pause, he spoke quietly. Actually, I was also offered a large sum of money in exchange for marrying you. What? Why would Victor go to such lengths to have me married? Catherine looked at a photograph on the break room wall. It was a picture from the founding of the department store, showing her young father, Richard, smiling proudly with his employees on opening day. Catherine recalled stories she had often heard from longtime employees about that day. Her father had declared to all the employees, "This department store will be a place to nurture people's dreams." After a moment of silence, she spoke quietly. "My real father, Richard Kingston, used to manage this department store. And he often said, a corporation is not just a tool for pursuing profits. It must enrich people's lives." Marcus nodded silently. "That's a wonderful philosophy." "Yes. But Victor seems to have no such principles now." Catherine stood in front of the photograph and gently dusted the frame. "Since my mother passed away 5 years ago, employee welfare programs have been progressively abolished, and the budget for charitable activities has been cut year by year. This opposition to the funding for this activity must be part of that trend." "Yes. But why the sudden proposal of marriage?" Marcus asked quietly, prompting Catherine to start organizing her thoughts. First, the issue with the funding, and then suddenly marriage. And then media attention and increased donations. Indeed, marrying someone like me, a former homeless janitor, would attract attention. But it's not just that. Catherine's eyes sparkled. "Victor said, the department store will be managed as before. He wants me to focus solely on charitable activities. He wants to keep me away from management. Why would he go to such lengths? Yes, why is he so desperate? There must be a reason he fears me exercising the management rights inherited from my father." Catherine looked at the photograph again. It also included a young Victor, standing next to her father. His expression seemed to hide something not seen today. "We need to uncover Victor's intentions." Catherine looked away from the photograph. Her gaze filled with resolve as she faced Marcus. The old wooden chair creaked softly with her movement. "Yes, and there's something else that bothers me." Marcus stood up and walked towards Catherine. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. The old floorboards creaked slightly under his weight. "Victor has an air about him that seems familiar." "Familiar?" Catherine looked surprised. "I can't explain it clearly, but it's like someone from a distant memory. Someone I've met before somewhere." Marcus furrowed his brow as he tried to piece together fragments of his memory. "Also, the pocket watch he always carries. There seems to be some special meaning to that gold pocket watch. The small pendant-like ornament hanging from the chain. I feel like I've seen it somewhere before." "Pocket watch." Catherine's voice sank into thoughtfulness. She walked slowly towards an old filing cabinet. Her footsteps echoed quietly in the room, and the historically worn floorboards creaked faintly. "Actually, my father once had a similar pocket watch." She opened a drawer of the cabinet and pulled out a yellowed photo album. The leather cover bore deep scars of time. The lamp in the corner of the room cast a soft light on the old album. Marcus gasped. He felt something tremble faintly deep inside him. The warm air from the old heater gently caressed the tension floating between them. "What kind of pocket watch was it?" "Here is a photo." Catherine carefully turned the pages of the album. The yellowed pages quietly narrated a story from another time. There was a photo of her father in his younger days, with a recognizable pocket watch hanging from a chain. "This is it." Catherine gently stroked the page as she spoke. In the sepia-toned photo, the gold pocket watch seemed to emit a soft light. The scent of the album's leather wafted through the quiet air. At the end of the chain, there was a small rose pendant. Rose. Marcus's voice trailed off as he stared at the photo. A sudden light appeared in his eyes. Victor's pocket watch also has a similar. Yes, indeed. There might be records about this watch among my father's belongings. But aren't those documents under Victor's control? Yes, that's correct. But there is supposed to be a hidden safe in my father's study that even Victor doesn't know about. Hidden safe. Hope mixed into Marcus's voice. The table lamp illuminated the resolve on his face. Actually, I've been rereading my father's diary these past few days. I found it right after he passed away and kept it. So neither my mother nor Victor knows it exists. Catherine turned to meet Marcus's gaze. Her eyes held a strong determination. It mentions that he stored important documents in the safe, especially about a certain pocket watch. It might be this watch we're talking about. We need to check that it is safe, don't we? But how? Tomorrow, Victor has meetings with clients all day. We should have time to search for my father's study during that. Marcus sighed deeply and leaned against the cabinet. The heavy wooden furniture supported his weight. It's too risky. If we're found. But we don't have another choice. Determination filled Catherine's voice. If we don't solve this mystery, we'll forever be puppets controlled by Victor. Understood. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll go with you. Together, we can look through more documents. Then tomorrow morning at 9, in my father's study. Catherine explained how they would get there. Then placed the album back on its spot, casting one last glance at its leather cover. The old cabinet drawer closed with a faint sound. Outside the window, a quiet rain had begun to fall late at night. The raindrops traced fantastical patterns on the glass, illuminated by the streetlights. Marcus stood by the window, absorbed in the view. Afterward, they left the hallway in different directions. The sound of Catherine's heels and Marcus's footsteps dissolved into the night's silence. The old department store seemed to silently watch over their secret promise. The next morning, before sunrise, a heavy fog enveloped the streets of San Francisco. Catherine inserted a brass key into the lock, which clicked quietly. The long-unused door creaked slightly as it opened. Morning light streamed into the study in thin beams. This is my father's study. Since my mother passed, probably no one has entered. Catherine stepped quietly into the room. The thick carpet softly enveloped her footsteps. The study's air was deeply infused with the scent of old leather and wood. Marcus carefully closed the door and surveyed the study. Heavy wooden bookshelves covered one wall, neatly lined with countless old books. It's like time has stopped here, he murmured. In the center of the room stood a stately desk aged by the years, with documents still meticulously arranged as they had been in the past. An old oil painting hung on the wall, its frame softly glowing in the morning light. The safe should be behind this painting, Catherine said as she moved a chair by the window. The old leather chair made a faint sound, revealing its age. But the diary only has cryptic notes. Let's look together, Marcus responded as he approached the oil painting. The frame contained a portrait of a young woman. In the soft light, she had a gentle smile on her face. In her hand, she held a pocket watch, its sheen standing out in the painting. This woman in the portrait, she seems familiar. When Catherine turned around, a deep contemplation was evident on Marcus's face. He stared intently at the woman depicted, his eyes struggling to remember something painful. The old study's air quietly stagnated between them. The pocket watch she's holding. Mother? Marcus reached out to the painting as he spoke. Ah, this is my mother. Catherine gasped at Marcus's words. Her grip on her father's diary tightened. Below the painting, a small title read Ellen. This woman is your mother? It's titled Ellen, but... Catherine's face suddenly brightened. I remember now, the diary mentioned a woman named Ellen, who visited my father. And... She recalled a passage from the diary and shared it with Marcus. It described how her father was told the truth by a woman named Ellen, who had entrusted him with a pocket watch. Her father had written that her demeanor seemed like she was trying to escape something. And she had a young son. Catherine's gaze shifted to Marcus. Ellen. Marcus's voice trembled slightly. That's my mother's name. Marcus. You were Ellen's young son. Catherine's voice was a mixture of certainty and turmoil. Another fact connected in her mind. And according to the diary, Ellen was Victor's first wife. Catherine carefully continued her thoughts. Strangely enough, despite being close enough to call each other best friends, my father and Victor never had family interactions. I heard from my mother that Victor was always businesslike and did not prefer personal relationships. That's why I didn't know about Ellen or you. I never knew about Victor's past because he and my mother remarried. And it was never mentioned. Marcus. You are Victor's son. Marcus's eyes widened as his memories, previously obscured by fog, began to clear vividly. Inside the large mansion, a father is always busy with work, hardly ever returning home. When he was home, he was cold like a stranger. And his arguments with my mother could be heard. Victor is my father. Marcus's voice shook. The mother in the portrait still looked at him with a gentle gaze. So that's why he looked familiar. But what was my mother trying to escape from? The diary mentioned that Ellen entrusted him with evidence that he vowed to protect. Catherine's gaze moved toward the fireplace. But the entries stop abruptly after that. Just then, a sound like old wood creaking echoed behind them. Turning around, they saw that a floorboard in front of the old-fashioned fireplace had slightly risen. The vibration from Marcus touching the painting had shifted. The long loosened floor material. What could it be? Catherine's words cut through the morning silence. The two cautiously approached the fireplace. The old floorboard creaked faintly under their steps. The scent of aged wood wafted up from beneath the thick carpet. Did father hide something here? Catherine knelt quietly and reached for the lifted floorboard. Dust accumulated over many years danced in the morning light streaming through the gaps. The stonework of the fireplace cast a solid shadow, as if watching over this secretive exploration. Can the floorboard be opened? Marcus asked as he stooped down. Yes, somehow. Her dress's hem touched the dusty floor. The light from the window gracefully illuminated her figure. As Catherine carefully lifted the floorboard, a wooden box appeared beneath it. The box, made of oak, was adorned with intricate carvings, and its surface showed a deep patina from many years. The fittings were rusted, but the box itself was surprisingly well preserved. Let's open it. Catherine brushed the dust off the box with a gentle touch, as if handling a precious treasure. As she quietly opened the lid, the aged hinges creaked softly, revealing yellowed photographs, a bundle of old documents, and an envelope. The air in the study felt heavier around these items. This is. Catherine picked up a faded photograph. It showed a young Ellen embracing a small boy. In the corner of the photo, the date and the names. Ellen and Marcus were written in fine handwriting. The color drained from Marcus's face. His hand trembled as it reached for the photograph. The old clock in the study ticked slowly as this shocking moment unfolded. Outside, the morning city began its daily bustle, but inside the study, it was as if time had stopped in a veil of silence. "This is definitely me." Marcus's voice quivered with deep emotion. His fingers gently stroked the surface of the photo. The dusty air of the study quietly swirled around his gesture. "The child smiling in my mother's arms is definitely." Catherine picked up the yellowed envelope. There was no sender's name, but the address read, "To those who seek the truth." Perhaps this is a message left by my father. Catherine extracted a piece of stationery from the envelope. Written in Richard Kingston's handwriting, the words captivated Marcus and Catherine as they read in bated breath. "My dear friend Ellen knew too much." Catherine quietly read her father's words. She was aware of the full extent of Victor's corrupt management. Stock fraud, fictitious investments, and plans for corporate takeovers. His ambitions were boundless, and his methods were merciless. Marcus gasped. In his hands, the photograph of his mother trembled slightly. Catherine continued reading the letter. The letter says that Ellen hid documents inside the pocket watch. That could prove Victor's wrongdoing and entrusted it to my father for safekeeping. She then disappeared with Marcus to gather more evidence. It seems my father was also shocked by his best friend's misconduct. Looking at the date of this letter, my father died in an accidental death 2 years later. He left this world without passing on the truth. As she spoke, new memories resurfaced for Marcus. Days spent living in a different city with his mother. They avoided going out during the day and only went shopping quietly at night. Then, one night, his mother came home excited, holding a large envelope. "That's right, my mother made me a witness." Marcus's voice trembled. "My mother showed me the contents of the documents and said, 'Marcus, this is the truth. I want you to testify that you have seen this someday.'" But that night, Marcus's expression hardened. His memories came back in fragments. "Someone burst into the room. My mother hid me in the closet and said, 'Don't move.' Then, my memory goes." He held his head. "When I realized, I was already on the streets. I couldn't remember anything about my mother or the documents. I had seen everything was behind a fog." Catherine gasped. The last line written in her father's letter now held a heavier meaning. "So that's why Ellen entrusted the pocket watch to my father beforehand. To ensure the truth was preserved, even if something happened to them. That means all the truth is inside that pocket watch." "Most likely, yes." Catherine carefully folded the letter from her father as she responded. "But why is the pocket watch that my father was supposed to keep now in Victor's possession?" "Now that you mention it." Catherine traced back through her childhood memories. "After my father's death, when my mother was sorting through his study, Victor found the pocket watch among my father's belongings. He claimed, 'This is mine, why is it here?' So my mother returned it to him without question." "Is that so?" Marcus looked at the pocket watch depicted in his mother's portrait, feeling the irony of fate. The pocket watch Ellen had entrusted ended up back in Victor's hands. At that moment, multiple voices were heard from the hallway. "Message from the president. There's been a change in plans. Is he coming back already?" Yes, his car has just turned the corner. As the conversation faded away, the two in the study held their breath. Catherine hurriedly started putting the letter back into the envelope. Quick, let's tidy up, put the floorboard back. Catherine gave the instructions quickly. In Marcus's hand was the photograph of his mother Ellen and himself as a child. He carefully placed them back into a leather handbag, as if protecting a treasure. Marcus, you need to get back to your routine work immediately. Understood. Marcus aligned the floorboard back into place and gently stepped on it to settle it. Dust sparkled like tiny stars in the morning light. He carefully smoothed out the wrinkles in the carpet in front of the fireplace. The sound of the study door closing quietly echoed, as the elevator bell signaling Victor's arrival could be heard from afar. When Victor appeared in the grand entrance hall, the department store was already bustling with its usual business hours. Among the hurried footsteps of employees, his alone had an unusual presence. The sound of his expensive leather shoes striking the marble floor resonated with tension throughout the space. Catherine stood by the window in her office. Catherine. Victor's voice suddenly filled the room. The sound of the heavy door opening accompanied his presence, dominating the space. His expensive leather shoes pressed against the thick carpet. It seems it's been quite hectic here since the morning. Yes, preparing for the charity work. Catherine answered as she turned around, her voice maintaining composure but with a faint trace of tension. The office plant quietly rustled its leaves between them. Is that so? Victor slowly approached. In his hand, he held the infamous pocket watch. The morning light reflected off its golden surface, casting an eerie glow. Catherine. What were you doing in Richard's study? Victor's sharp words cut through the air like a blade of ice. He opened the pocket watch and stared at its face, while the metal surface reflected his cold expression. What? Catherine's heart pounded fiercely, yet her face showed no sign of disturbance. I was informed by the secretary. She saw you going up to the study floor first thing in the morning. Catherine thought. Thank goodness, it seems Marcus being in the study hasn't been noticed. Catherine felt relieved internally. Marcus had used the service elevator for the cleaning staff, so he hadn't passed through the executive floor's reception. The secretary had only seen her. Spending time in my father's study is my prerogative, isn't it? She responded with feigned calm. Well, indeed. Victor chuckled lowly, his smile mixing with a dangerous undertone. He slowly approached Catherine's desk and placed the pocket watch on it. The sound of metal touching the desk surface sharply echoed in the quiet space. But you should have more important things to think about than wasting time there. For example? Catherine quietly countered as Victor approached the desk, picking up the pocket watch. The sound of the metal lifting from the desk resonated coldly through the space. Wedding preparations. Marrying a janitor. It's the path you've chosen. You say it's the path I've chosen. Catherine stood up, facing Victor squarely. Her silhouette emerged against the morning light, intensifying the tension in the air. Wasn't it you who forced that choice upon me? I merely considered what's best for you. Victor responded while caressing the pocket watch in his palm. His gesture held a compulsive quality. The old wall clock's pendulum swung quietly, marking the time of their confrontation. It's also the best choice for the department store's future. Catherine, aware of her father's letter in her handbag, slowly formulated her words. The best choice. For whom, exactly? Her voice carried a hint of irony. Suddenly, Victor's expression hardened. You seem to have learned some boldness. He slowly stood up and walked towards the window. It was as if the mask of a benevolent guardian was falling away from him. Very well. Let's make things clear. Victor turned around, his eyes filled with a cold resolution. On the 15th of next month, you will marry Marcus Foster. There will be no further discussion. Catherine's face drained of color. Victor's tone, leaving no room for her to argue, was like a mere declaration. Victor, this is so one-sided. If you refuse, support from the department store will be cut off at that moment. All your precious charity work will end, just like that. Victor flicked the pocket watch's chain as he spoke, his voice imbued with a chilliness she had never heard before. Catherine's fingers tightened around the leather of her handbag, the letter inside casting a significant weight. Many people's lives hinged on this decision. Next month, she murmured quietly. Uncovering Victor's misdeeds in such a short time was nearly impossible. Yet, she could not afford to show her urgency now. Just leave all the arrangements to me. Victor returned to the desk with a triumphant smile. You should continue to focus on your charity work. Don't worry about the wedding preparations. His words oozed complacency, underestimating her as just a naive, good-hearted girl. Thank you for your kindness. Catherine responded with feigned calm, her grip on the letter tightening. There was only about a month until the wedding. To reveal the truth left by her father and Ellen, she had very little time. Outside, the morning sunlight began to illuminate the city. The chime signaling the department store's opening rang in the distance. A new day was quietly starting. That evening, in the department store's rooftop garden, Catherine and Marcus spoke under an old wisteria trellis, hidden from view. Victor polishes that pocket watch every night. Catherine explained her stepfather's habitual routine. At 11 p.m., for about 30 minutes in his room. Strangely, it's an absolute routine. On nights when he works late in the department store's office, he would polish it there instead. Marcus nodded quietly. We'll have to target that night. It coincides with the nighttime cleaning hours. But how can we get close? If I can verify it when Victor steps away from his desk. Marcus continued slowly, tracing the threads of his memory. My mother told me that the back of the pocket watch has a hidden clasp. Inside, there is a microfilm. Marcus's voice trailed off. His childhood memories slowly formed from the mist. Catherine looked worried. It's too dangerous. If you're caught, it's okay. Marcus smiled. No one pays much attention to a janitor. Besides, he looked earnestly at Catherine. I want to see the truth with my own eyes. Above them, the wisteria flowers swayed in the evening breeze. Then, the next week, their chance came. Tonight, we will go through with it. Be careful. Their plan went more smoothly than expected, as if guided by the late Ellen. During an office cleaning, when Victor stepped out to answer a phone call, Marcus managed to open the pocket watch's back cover. Inside was indeed a small, rolled-up microfilm. I found it. The next morning in the study, Marcus reported to Catherine with a trembling voice full of excitement. They spread out the developed film, staring at the array of numbers. This is the stock transaction record from 15 years ago. Catherine gasped. Still, it's not enough. Something definitive. Just then, Marcus's foot caught on a floorboard in front of the fireplace. A faint hollow sound echoed. The two exchanged glances and quietly lifted the floorboard. There, they found a safe that their father had hidden. Father hid something here too? Catherine stared at the safe dial. A 4-digit code. She pulled out her father's diary and flipped to the last page. Casually written after safekeeping were some numbers. Catherine turned the dial. Her mother's birthday. With a small click, the safe door opened. Inside was an envelope containing Ellen's handwritten denunciation. And numerous documents proving Victor's misconduct. All the evidence, transcending time, was now assembled here. With this, we can reveal the truth. And finally, the day of the wedding arrived. The cathedral, the venue, was adorned with lavish decorations. As guests took their seats one by one, Victor watched the proceedings with a cold expression. His pocket watch gleamed ominously at his chest. If there is anyone who objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The priest's words echoed. A faint smile appeared on Victor's lips. This marriage would surely distance Catherine from management and keep her focused solely on charity work. However, his expression froze the next moment. I have something I need to say. Suddenly, Marcus stood up. Marcus? What is he? Then Marcus pulled a photo from a leather bag. It was a family photo taken 15 years ago, featuring a young Marcus, his mother Ellen, and Victor Lawrence. As the hall fell silent, Marcus revealed the microfilm from the pocket watch and the evidence left by Richard Kingston, exposing Victor's illicit stock transactions and his plans to take over companies. And to protect this evidence, my mother risked her life. Marcus's voice boomed through the cathedral. Victor Lawrence. You are my father, and you drove my mother to her limits. The murmurs filled the hall. Victor's face turned pale. What are you saying? My son. That's a lie, a better lie. It's no lie. Marcus pulled out a document. This is the DNA test result. Irrefutable proof of my paternity with Victor Lawrence. Victor glanced at the document and twisted his face. Fabrication. The sample was taken from a glass on your desk, with Catherine's help. And here's the record of my mother's disappearance just before she went missing. My mother knew of the fraud, and you drove her to desperation. I was abandoned. I still vividly remember that rainy night. Silence. I did nothing wrong. Victor's voice grew harsh. Yes, she knew all about my plan to control the department store. She tried to gather evidence to frame me. So, I couldn't let her interfere. Victor's voice grew more agitated. I remember the report from that night. The mother and child tried to flee, but the child was left in an alley. He must be dead by now. I thought it was perfect. So what happened to Ellen? Catherine asked, her voice trembling. Who knows? The men I tasked to handle her took her somewhere. I thought she'd never come back, but to think you were alive. Victor suddenly clamped his mouth shut, but it was too late. He had confessed his own crimes. We've recorded everything, announced a detective who appeared from the back of the cathedral. Catherine had alerted the police. Victor Lawrence, you are under arrest for attempted murder, child abandonment, and securities fraud violations. Don't make me laugh. Without me, this department store would have been history long ago. His voice abruptly cut off. Surrounded by cold stares from all around, Victor realized for the first time that he was utterly defeated. He quietly extended his hands forward. His once imposing demeanor and arrogance were nowhere to be seen. 1 month later. I'm thinking of studying business management at university, Marcus told Catherine in her office. I want to understand Richard's philosophy of enriching people's lives properly. And through this department store, I want to save many people. That's wonderful. You have the chance to reclaim the 15 years that were taken from you. Catherine said with a genuine smile. I will support you fully. I'll provide for your college tuition and anything else you need. Marcus expressed his gratitude. Standing in front of the desk he once cleaned, he harbored a new resolve. Before them lay a future full of hope. A year later, Marcus began attending a community college, studying the basics of business, and handling part-time work at the department store in the evenings. Since starting to learn the basics of business, I've begun to understand more. He shared with Catherine as they drank coffee under the pergola in the rooftop garden. The wisteria leaves rustled in the wind, casting gentle dappled sunlight over them. You'll surely do well transferring to a 4-year university. Catherine encouraged him, knowing his efforts better than anyone. Marcus continued to study diligently with encouragement from Catherine. Then, on a day at the end of March, bathed in spring sunshine, I did it. Marcus was holding the results of his university transfer exam. His sincere efforts at community college had paid off, and he had been accepted into the prestigious private university's business school. Congratulations, Marcus. Catherine said, smiling sincerely as she looked over the acceptance letter. In their usual spot in the rooftop garden, the breeze gently tousled their hair under the budding wisteria. This place, once a spot for secret discussions, had become a treasured memory for them both. I feel like I'm finally taking the first step into a new life. Confidence resonated in Marcus's voice. His journey had steadily shaped him. Over the years, their relationship naturally evolved. Initially, they were comrades in pursuit of the truth. Eventually, they became indispensable supports for one another. At some point, their hearts had grown close. After transferring to university, Marcus proposed a groundbreaking program. The Second Life Project offered people who were homeless the chance to start their own businesses. The initiative, a blend of Catherine's spirit of charity and Marcus's business acumen, quickly gained attention. One December evening, Marcus led Catherine to the place where she had once offered him warm coffee and sandwiches. The department store facade was adorned with gentle holiday lights, and the crisp winter air enveloped the city. Beyond the Bay Bridge, the setting sun cast a golden glow over the water. This place changed my life twice. The first time was when I experienced your kindness, and the second time, when I fell in love with you, Marcus said, kneeling and pulling out a small box. Inside was a custom-made new pocket watch, its surface delicately decorated with a small wisteria flower charm on the chain, symbolizing the memories of their rooftop garden. In the clear evening air, the polished gold surface softly gleamed. I want us to carve our future together with this new watch, Marcus said as Catherine nodded tearfully. In the crisp winter air, their new story was about to begin. 2 months later, on a warm spring day heralding the season's change, they exchanged vows, watched by many whose lives had been restored through their efforts. The church, simple yet heartwarming, marked the beginning of their new journey together as Marcus and Catherine stepped into a new phase of life. 5 years later, the Richard Kingston Memorial Foundation, established by the couple, steadily expanded its circle of social contribution, bringing new hope to the San Francisco community. The top floor, once dominated by Victor, had been transformed into the training center for the New Life program, nurturing the dreams of many entrepreneurs. Although the historic building's facade remained unchanged, its interior breathed sure and steadfast transformation. On a weekend afternoon, in the department store's history museum, their 3-year-old daughter Ellen was curiously looking at 2 pocket watches displayed in a showcase. One old watch that spoke of truth, and a new one that promised love. "Mommy, what's the story behind these watches?" Catherine smiled gently at her daughter who asked the question. Nearby, Marcus, stroking his daughter's curly black hair, named after her grandmother, began, "Well, it's a story of hope and love." The 2 watches, bridging past and future, silently continued to mark time. As if to say, true atonement is not erasing the past, but transforming it into the foundation of hope to all who visited.